Your low-class background would embarrass my career. Vanessa said it while putting on a new, expensive evening dress. A sleek black number that probably cost more than I used to make in a month back when I was still working construction. She stood in front of our bedroom mirror, adjusting the diamond necklace I'd somehow managed to afford for our 5th anniversary. Back when I thought we were building something together. I watched her from the doorway, my bad leg throbbing the way it always did when the weather changed. 6 years since the accident that crushed my knee and ended my career as a construction engineer. 6 years of watching my wife transform from the beer-drinking, down-to-earth woman I'd married into this cold, calculating social climber who looked at me like I was something she'd stepped in. Fine, I said quietly. Have it your way. She didn't even turn around. Just kept applying her lipstick with surgical precision, preparing for her firm's annual gala. The event where they'd finally reveal the identity of their mysterious new owner, the billionaire who'd bought out Henderson, Blake, and Associates 3 months ago and turned it into the most prestigious law firm in the city. Good, she said, her reflection meeting my eyes in the mirror. I've worked too hard to get where I am to have you dragging me down with your background. My background, right? The same background that had put her through law school when her daddy's money ran out. The same hands that had built half the commercial buildings in this city, including the gleaming tower where her precious law firm operated. Need a ride to the gala? I asked, keeping my voice level. Blake's picking me up, she said, and I caught the slight flush in her cheeks when she mentioned her senior partner. Blake Parsons, 44, divorced, drives a Porsche, and has been sniffing around my wife like a dog in heat for the past 6 months. I limped downstairs to the kitchen and poured myself 3 fingers of bourbon. Through the window, I could see our neighbors getting ready for their own evening plans. Normal couples doing normal things. When had Vanessa and I stopped being normal? The doorbell rang at 7 sharp. I opened it to find Blake standing there in his $1,000 tuxedo, holding a corsage like they were going to prom. Will, he said with that practiced smile that never reached his eyes. Looking good. I was wearing jeans and a flannel shirt. Thanks, Blake. You too. That tux rental, or did you actually buy it? His smile faltered just a bit. Bought, actually, Armani. Nice. I had an Armani once. Of course, it was a work shirt, but still. Vanessa appeared at the top of the stairs like she was making a grand entrance. Blake's jaw practically hit the floor, and I had to admit, she looked stunning. For a moment, I remembered why I'd fallen for her in the first place. Ready? Blake asked, offering his arm. She took it without looking back at me. More than ready. I watched them walk to his Porsche, watched him open her door with exaggerated chivalry, watched her laugh at something he whispered. Then they were gone, leaving me alone with my bourbon and my memories. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I hadn't called in 6 years. My finger hovered over it for a long moment before I finally hit dial. Harlan Industries, Mr. Harlan's private line. It's Will Carter, I said. Tell him I might need to cash in that favor. There was a pause, then, please hold, Mr. Carter. 30 seconds later, a familiar voice came on the line. Will, Jesus, it's been too long. How's the leg? Still attached, I said. Richard, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be straight with me. Always. Henderson, Blake, and Associates. That was you, wasn't it? The mysterious buyer. Another pause, longer this time. How did you? Lucky guess. My wife works there. Your wife? What's her name? Vanessa Carter. Goes by her maiden name at work, Vanessa Morrison. I heard him typing on a keyboard. Jesus Christ, Will. She's been trying to get a meeting with me for months. Sent me her photo, her resume. Even had her assistant call to set up a dinner. My grip tightened on the phone. She mentioned she was married? Not once. In fact, she specifically mentioned being single and available for professional development opportunities. I took a long pull of bourbon. They're announcing you tonight at the gala, aren't they? That's the plan. Will, I had no idea. If I had known, don't worry about it, I said. Actually, I think this might work out perfectly. What do you need? 6 years ago, I'd saved Richard Harlan's construction company from bankruptcy. His father had started it, but Richard was young and inexperienced, and a series of bad contracts had nearly destroyed everything. I'd worked 18-hour days for 6 months straight, restructuring their operations, renegotiating their deals, and turning them into one of the most profitable construction companies on the East Coast. When it was over, Richard had tried to give me a partnership. I'd turned it down. I was happy just being a good engineer. But he'd made me a promise. Anything I ever needed, anything at all, I just had to ask. I think, I said slowly. It's time I came back to work. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee and the newspaper when I heard Vanessa's key in the lock. She burst through the door like the devil himself was chasing her, still wearing her evening dress, but with her makeup smeared and her hair disheveled. Will, she called, her voice cracking with panic. Will, where are you? Kitchen, I called back calmly. She appeared in the doorway, trembling. Her face was pale and I could see the fear in her eyes. Real, bone-deep terror that made my chest tighten, despite everything she'd put me through. We need to talk, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. About what? About last night, about the gala. About... She stopped mid-sentence as another car pulled into our driveway. Through the window, I could see a black Mercedes sedan, the kind that costs more than most people's houses. Vanessa's face went white. Oh, God. He followed me home. The front door opened without a knock, and Richard Harlan walked into my kitchen like he owned the place, which, given his net worth, he probably could have. He was older than when I'd last seen him. 55 now, with silver hair and the kind of confidence that comes from having more money than some small countries. He looked at Vanessa, then at me, and I watched understanding dawn in his eyes. Well, he said quietly, this is interesting. Vanessa was staring at him like he was a ghost. Mr. Harlan, I can explain. Can you? He pulled out a chair and sat down at my table without invitation. Can you explain why you've been telling everyone at the firm that you're single? Can you explain why you've been trying to seduce me for months while your husband, my friend, was sitting at home? She looked between us, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. Your friend? I don't understand. Will Carter, Richard said, gesturing to me. The man who saved my company. The man I owe everything to. The man who apparently has been married to one of my employees for the past 8 years. I took a sip of my coffee. She doesn't like to talk about me at work. Says I embarrass her. Richard's expression hardened. Is that so? Vanessa was backing toward the door now, but Richard's voice stopped her cold. Sit down, Vanessa. It wasn't a request. She sat. Last night, Richard continued, you cornered me at the bar. You told me you were single, ambitious, and willing to do anything to advance your career. You suggested we continue the conversation in private. When I declined, you became quite persistent. Vanessa's face was burning red now. I was networking. That's what lawyers do. Networking, Richard repeated. Is that what you call it when you slip your hotel room key into a man's pocket? I set down my coffee cup. She did what? Room 412 at the Ritz-Carlton. I found it when I got home. Richard pulled the key card from his jacket and placed it on the table. I assume this was your idea of a professional development opportunity. Vanessa was crying now, mascara running down her cheeks. Will, I can explain. It's not what you think. What I think, I said quietly, is that my wife of 8 years has been cheating on me with her boss while trying to seduce her boss's boss. What I think is that she's been so ashamed of me that she's been pretending to be single. What I think is that she's forgotten who helped her become the woman she is today. Richard leaned back in his chair. Will, I owe you a debt that can never be repaid. 6 years ago, you saved my company, my family's legacy, everything I cared about. I told you then that if you ever needed anything, anything at all, you just had to ask. He turned to look at Vanessa, and his expression was ice cold. I'm calling in that debt now. Vanessa was shaking her head frantically. Please, Mr. Harlan. I made a mistake. I was drunk. I wasn't thinking clearly. My marriage has been difficult, and Your marriage has been difficult? I interrupted. I worked 2 jobs to put you through law school. I supported you through the bar exam, through your first year when you weren't making any money. I've been nothing but supportive while you've been climbing the social ladder and leaving me behind. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she said desperately. The other partners, they judge me for everything. My clothes, my car, my background. I had to reinvent myself to succeed. And part of that reinvention was pretending I didn't exist. She couldn't meet my eyes. I thought if I could just get established, if I could prove myself, then maybe what? Maybe you'd be embarrassed of me forever. Richard stood up. Vanessa, you're fired, effective immediately. Security will escort you to your office to collect your personal belongings, and then you're banned from the premises. She jumped to her feet. You can't do that. I have contracts, clients, cases pending, all of which will be reassigned. Your partnership track is terminated, your benefits are canceled, and I'll be making sure that every major law firm in the city knows exactly why you were let go. That's illegal. You can't blacklist me. I'm not blacklisting you, Richard said calmly. I'm simply sharing information about your professional conduct with my colleagues in the legal community. What they choose to do with that information is up to them. Vanessa turned to me, tears streaming down her face. Will, please, don't let him do this. We can work things out. We can go to counseling. We can— No, I said quietly. We can't. Richard put his hand on my shoulder. Will, I meant what I said 6 years ago. Anything you need. I looked at my wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, standing there in her expensive dress, crying about the consequences of her own choices. I thought about all the times she'd made me feel small, all the times she'd acted like she was ashamed of me, all the nights she'd come home late smelling like another man's cologne. I want my job back, I said. I want to be your right-hand man again, like before the accident. Done. Same salary you would have had if you'd never left, plus 6 years of raises. You start Monday. Vanessa was staring at us in shock. You're serious? You're actually going to destroy my career over this? You destroyed your career, I said. I'm just getting mine back. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, legal documents, and Vanessa's increasingly desperate attempts to salvage her reputation. She'd moved into a hotel, the same Ritz-Carlton where she'd tried to seduce Richard, which I found grimly appropriate. I was sitting in my new office at Harlan Industries, reviewing construction plans for a shopping center in Delaware, when my phone rang. Will, it's Deke. Deke Morrison was my oldest friend, a bartender at Murphy's Pub who'd known me since high school. He was also Vanessa's cousin, which had made things complicated over the years. Hey, Deke, how's it going? Well, that depends. Is it true what I'm hearing about you and Vanessa? What are you hearing? That she got fired for trying to sleep with her boss, and that you're somehow involved with the guy who owns the company. I leaned back in my chair. Richard Harlan and I have a history. I helped him out a few years back, and he's returning the favor. Jesus, Will. Vanessa's been calling everyone in the family, trying to get them to talk to you. She's telling people you set her up, that you conspired with your rich friend to destroy her career. And what are you telling them? The truth. That she's been cheating on you for months with that Blake a-hole, and that she finally got caught. I sat up straighter. Months? How do you know that? Because she brought him to Murphy's 3 times in the past 2 months. Introduced him as a friend from work, but they were all over each other. I didn't say anything because, well, it wasn't my place, but I probably should have. I felt a familiar anger building in my chest. Who else knows? Half the neighborhood, probably. They weren't exactly discreet. That evening, I drove to Murphy's. It was a working-class bar in the old part of town. The kind of place where construction workers and mechanics went to unwind after a long day. The kind of place Vanessa used to love, back when she was still the woman I'd married. Deke was behind the bar, polishing glasses with practiced efficiency. He looked up when I walked in and nodded toward a corner booth. Your usual spot's open. I ordered a bourbon and settled into the worn leather seat. The bar was busy for a Wednesday night, filled with familiar faces from my old life. These were good people, honest, hard-working folks who didn't care about designer clothes or social climbing. Will Carter, as I live and breathe. I looked up to see Tommy Brennan approaching my table. Tommy and I had worked together for 5 years before my accident. He was a good man, a skilled electrician with 3 kids and a wife who adored him. Tommy, how's the family? Can't complain, kids are healthy, work steady. He slid into the booth across from me. Heard you're back in the game. Something like that. Working for Harlan Industries now. No crap? That's a hell of a step up from where you were. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Also heard about you and Vanessa. Bad news travels fast. It does. And I'll be honest with you, Will. Most folks around here aren't surprised. Why's that? Tommy took a long pull of his beer. She changed, man. Used to be one of us, you know? Used to come in here, shoot pool, drink beer from the bottle. Last few years, though, it was like she thought she was too good for this place. Too good for us. She was trying to better herself. Nothing wrong with bettering yourself. But There's a difference between growing and forgetting where you came from. Vanessa forgot. Over the next hour, more of my old friends stopped by the table. The consensus was universal. They'd watched Vanessa transform from a down-to-earth woman into someone they didn't recognize. Someone who looked down on them, who acted embarrassed when Will brought her around. "Remember her birthday party 2 years ago?" asked Mike Sullivan, a plumber who'd known us since we were dating. "She made you take her to that fancy French place downtown instead of having the usual party here. Then she spent the whole night checking her phone and complaining about the service." "And last Christmas," added Danny Torres, a carpenter who'd worked on our house renovation. "She wouldn't even let you invite us to the party. Said it was for her work friends only." I listened to their stories, feeling a mixture of sadness and vindication. These men had been my friends for years, and Vanessa had systematically cut them out of our lives. She'd been ashamed of them the same way she'd been ashamed of me. "You're better off without her," Tommy said finally. "I know that's hard to hear, but it's true. She wasn't the woman you married anymore." My phone buzzed with a text message. "Vanessa, we need to talk. Meet me at the house in an hour." I showed the message to Tommy. He shook his head. "Don't do it, man. Whatever she wants to say, it's not going to change anything." But I was curious. What could she possibly have to say now? I arrived at the house to find Vanessa's car in the driveway and lights on in the living room. She still had her key, though I'd already decided to change the locks tomorrow. She was sitting on the couch when I walked in, looking smaller somehow than she had a few days ago. Her designer clothes had been replaced with jeans and a sweater, clothes I remembered from the early days of our marriage. "Thank you for coming," she said quietly. "You've got 10 minutes. Will, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you, and I know I made terrible choices, but we've been together for 8 years. That has to count for something." I remained standing, keeping my distance. "What do you want, Vanessa?" "I want to save our marriage. I want us to go to counseling, to work through this. I made mistakes, but so did you." "What mistakes did I make?" "You gave up." Her voice was stronger now, more like the lawyer she'd become. "After your accident, you just gave up. You stopped trying to be the man I married. You became bitter and resentful." "I became disabled. You became a sufferer. You wallowed in self-pity instead of fighting to rebuild your life." I felt my temper flare. "I supported you for years while you built your career. I never complained, never made you feel guilty for working late or traveling for cases. I was proud of your success." "But you weren't successful yourself. You were content to just exist, to collect disability and feel sorry for yourself. And that embarrassed you." "Yes," she said, and at least she was being honest now. "It did. I was surrounded by successful, ambitious people, and my husband was sitting at home watching TV and drinking beer. So you decided to pretend I didn't exist. I decided to protect my career. I worked too hard to let anyone think I was married to someone who'd given up on life." I stared at her, seeing clearly for the first time in years. This wasn't about her mistakes or her affair with Blake. This was about who she'd become. Someone who valued appearance over substance, success over loyalty, image over love. "You're right," I said quietly. "I did give up. But not on life. I gave up on us. I gave up the day you stopped being proud to be married to me." "Well, I'm done, Vanessa. I want a divorce." Her composure cracked. "Please don't do this. We can work it out. I'll leave the firm. We can move somewhere new, start over." "You can't leave the firm. You don't work there anymore, remember? I'll find another job. There are other firms, other opportunities." "Not after Richard gets done spreading the word about your professional conduct." Her eyes flashed with anger. "That's not fair. One mistake shouldn't destroy my entire career." "One mistake? You've been cheating on me for months. You tried to seduce your boss. You've been lying about being married. That's not one mistake. That's a pattern of behavior." "I was trying to survive in a cutthroat business." "No, you were trying to sleep your way to the top. There's a difference." She stood up, her hands clenched into fists. "You sanctimonious fool! You sit there judging me when you've been plotting behind my back with your rich friend. You set me up. I didn't set you up. You set yourself up the moment you decided I wasn't good enough for you anymore." "I never said that." "You didn't have to. You showed it every day for the past 3 years. Every time you forgot to mention you were married. Every time you excluded me from work events. Every time you looked at me like I was something you'd stepped in." She was crying again, but I felt nothing. The man who'd loved her, who'd have done anything for her, was gone. She'd eliminated him slowly, one small humiliation at a time. I'll fight the divorce, she said desperately. I'll take half of everything, the house, your new job, whatever settlement you got from Richard. Good luck with that. I checked with a lawyer today. Infidelity is still grounds for divorce in this state, and I've got plenty of evidence. You'll be lucky to get your clothes and your car. You fool! Yeah, I probably am, but at least I'm an honest fool. She grabbed her purse and headed for the door. This isn't over, Will. Yes, it is. After she left, I poured myself a drink and sat in my living room, looking around at the house we'd shared for 5 years. Tomorrow, I'd start the process of making it mine alone. I'd change the locks, pack up her remaining belongings, and begin the next chapter of my life. For the first time in years, I felt something I'd almost forgotten. Hope. Monday morning, I walked into Harlan Industries as an employee for the first time in 6 years. The building had changed, bigger, more modern, with marble floors and glass walls that screamed success. But Richard's office was exactly the same, cluttered with blueprints, architectural models, and photos of construction sites. Welcome back, he said, standing up from behind his desk. How does it feel? Like coming home. Good. Because I've got 6 years' worth of projects to catch you up on, and about 50 problems that need your particular brand of problem solving. We spent the morning reviewing Harlan Industries' current operations. The company had grown exponentially since I'd left, expanding from commercial construction into real estate development, property management, and even some tech ventures. Richard had built an empire, but he'd never forgotten the lessons I'd taught him about the fundamentals of good business. The law firm was an experiment, he explained as we looked over financial reports. I wanted to see if we could diversify into professional services, but after meeting some of the people there, he shook his head. Present company excluded, of course. Of course, what are you going to do with it? Sell it, probably, or clean house and start over. Half the partners are more interested in politics than practicing law, and the other half are more interested in their social lives than their clients. What about Blake? Richard's expression darkened. Blake Parsons is a special case. I've been looking into his client list, his billing practices, his case management. Let's just say your wife wasn't the only person he was taking advantage of. That afternoon, I was reviewing construction schedules when my assistant knocked on my door. Mr. Carter, there's a Blake Parsons here to see you. He says it's urgent. I looked up from my paperwork. Send him in. Blake walked into my office looking like he hadn't slept in days. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, his expensive suit was wrinkled, and there were dark circles under his eyes. Will, we need to talk. About what? About Vanessa. About what happened at the gala. About this whole misunderstanding. I leaned back in my chair. What misunderstanding would that be? Look, I know how this looks, but Vanessa and we're not having an affair. We're colleagues, friends. Maybe we got a little too close, but it was never physical. Blake, I really don't care. You should care, because your friend Harlan is destroying both our careers over nothing. My friend Harlan is protecting his company from employees who can't maintain professional boundaries. Blake sat down without being invited. Come on, Will. We're both men of the world here. You know how these things happen. A little flirtation. A few drinks after work. Maybe some harmless fun. It doesn't mean anything. Harmless fun? Vanessa's a beautiful woman, and she's ambitious. Sometimes ambitious people make poor choices when they're trying to get ahead, but that doesn't make her a bad person. I studied his face, trying to figure out if he actually believed what he was saying. Blake, let me ask you something. Did you know Vanessa was married? Of course. And you pursued her anyway? I didn't pursue anyone. She made it clear she was interested, and I'm only human. So you took advantage of a woman who was clearly having problems in her marriage. I didn't take advantage of anyone. Vanessa is a grown woman who makes her own choices. I stood up and walked around my desk until I was standing directly in front of him. Blake shrank back in his chair, suddenly aware that despite my limp, I was still 6 inches taller and 50 pounds heavier than him. Here's what's going to happen, I said quietly. You're going to stay away from my wife. You're going to accept whatever consequences Richard decides are appropriate for your behavior, and you're going to stop pretending that you're the sufferer here. Will, be reasonable. We can work this out like civilized men. I am being reasonable. If I was being unreasonable, I'd throw you out that window. Blake's face went pale. Are you threatening me? I'm explaining your options. You can leave my office voluntarily, or I can help you leave. Your choice. He stood up quickly, straightening his tie with shaking hands. This isn't over. Yes, it is. After he left, I called Richard. Blake Parsons just paid me a visit. I said, what did he want? To convince me that his relationship with Vanessa was harmless flirtation. Richard laughed. Interesting. Because I just finished reviewing the security footage from the firm's holiday party last December. Apparently, Blake and Vanessa's idea of harmless flirtation involves making out in the supply closet. You're kidding. I wish I was. I've also got testimony from 3 different employees who saw them leaving the office together on multiple occasions, and hotel records showing they were both registered at the same conference in Boston last month. Different rooms, but adjoining. I felt a familiar anger building in my chest, but it was different now. Cleaner. More focused. What are you going to do? Blake's fired, effective immediately. I'm also reporting his conduct to the State Bar Association. As for the security footage and other evidence, well, that might be useful if Vanessa decides to fight the divorce. Richard, I appreciate everything you're doing, but... Will, stop. 6 years ago, you saved my company. You saved my family's legacy. You saved my life, basically. Helping you deal with a cheating wife and her dirtbag boyfriend is the least I can do. That evening, I drove back to Murphy's. The bar was quieter than it had been on Wednesday. Just a few regulars, watching the game and nursing their beers. I took my usual booth and ordered my usual bourbon. Deke came over during a commercial break. How was your first day back in the real world? Interesting. Blake Parsons stopped by to explain how his affair with Vanessa was just harmless flirtation. Jesus, that guy's got balls, I'll give him that. Had balls. Richard fired him this afternoon? Good. What about Vanessa? What about her? She's been calling my mom, trying to get the family to pressure you into reconciliation. Says you're being unreasonable, that you're letting your pride destroy your marriage. I took a sip of my bourbon. What's your mom saying? That Vanessa made her bed and now she can lie in it. Mom never liked how she treated you after the accident. I didn't know that. She didn't want to interfere, but she saw how you changed, how you started doubting yourself. Mom blamed Vanessa for that. I thought about the past 3 years, about how I'd gradually stopped seeing my friends, stopped going out, stopped believing I was worth anything. I thought it was depression from the accident, but maybe it was something else. Maybe it was the slow erosion of my self-worth by someone who was supposed to love me unconditionally. I'm filing for divorce tomorrow, I said. Good for you, you deserve better than what she was giving you. As I drove home that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Excitement about the future. I had my career back, my friends back, and most importantly, I had myself back. Vanessa had tried to make me smaller, to make me ashamed of who I was. But I was done being ashamed. I was done being anyone other than exactly who I was supposed to be. 3 weeks later, I was in my office reviewing plans for a new office complex when Richard walked in with a grim expression. We have a problem, he said. What kind of problem? The Vanessa kind. She's filed a lawsuit against Harlan Industries for wrongful termination, sexual maltreatment, and conspiracy to interfere with her career. I set down my coffee. She's suing you? She's suing the company, me personally, and you. She's claiming that you and I conspired to destroy her career out of revenge for her affair. Can she do that? She can file the lawsuit. Whether she can win it is another question entirely. Richard sat down across from my desk. Her lawyer's actually pretty good, James Morrison from Morrison and Associates. Morrison? That's her maiden name. Her uncle. Family lawyer, apparently. He's filed a motion for immediate injunctive relief, trying to get her job back while the lawsuit is pending. What are our chances? With the evidence we have, pretty good. But it's going to be expensive, time-consuming, and very public. She's also talking to reporters, trying to frame this as a story about powerful men destroying a woman's career. I rubbed my temples, feeling a headache coming on. What does she want? Her job back, a public apology, damages for lost income and emotional distress, and a guarantee that we won't interfere with her future employment prospects. In other words, everything. Pretty much. That evening, I met with my divorce attorney, Sarah Chen, at her downtown office. Sarah was a no-nonsense woman in her 40s who specialized in high-conflict divorces. Your wife is playing hardball, she said, spreading documents across her conference table. She's claiming that your relationship with Richard Harlan constitutes a hidden asset that should be considered in the property division. That's ridiculous. Maybe, but it's creative. She's also claiming that you conspired to have her fired, which constitutes intentional infliction of emotional distress. She wants the divorce delayed until the employment lawsuit is resolved. Can she do that? She can try, but I've got some ammunition of my own. Sarah pulled out a thick folder. Richard Harlan's private investigator has been busy. Hotel records, credit card statements, witness testimony, security footage. Your wife's affair with Blake Parsons is thoroughly documented. She showed me photographs of Vanessa and Blake entering and leaving hotels, restaurants, and even Blake's apartment. There were credit card records showing Blake paying for expensive dinners and hotel rooms. There were witness statements from colleagues who'd seen them together. This is more than enough to prove infidelity, Sarah said. In this state, that means she gets nothing from the marital assets. What about her lawsuit against Richard? That's actually working in our favor. The more aggressively she pursues it, the more it looks like she's trying to profit from her own misconduct. The next morning, I arrived at work to find a crowd of reporters outside the Harlan Industries building. Vanessa was standing on the sidewalk with her uncle, giving an impromptu press conference. This is about more than just my case, she was saying. This is about a pattern of powerful men using their influence to silence and destroy women who threaten them. A reporter asked, "What specifically are you alleging happened?" My husband conspired with his wealthy friend to have me fired after I refused to engage in inappropriate conduct with my employer. When I tried to maintain professional boundaries, they retaliated by destroying my career. I watched from my office window as she painted herself as the sufferer of a vast conspiracy. She was good at it, articulate, sympathetic, believable. If I didn't know the truth, I might have believed her myself. Richard appeared in my office doorway. Enjoying the show? She's very convincing. She's also about to be very embarrassed. He handed me his phone. Check the news. I looked at the screen and saw a headline. Local attorney caught in affair scandal. Below it was one of the security photos showing Vanessa and Blake in a passionate embrace outside a downtown hotel. How did this get out? I may have accidentally sent some files to the wrong email address, Richard said with a slight smile. Journalism is such an important public service, don't you think? By noon, the story had exploded across local media. The reporters who'd been sympathetically covering Vanessa's press conference were now asking much harder questions about her relationship with Blake Parsons and the circumstances of her termination. Her uncle tried to do damage control, claiming the photos were taken out of context, but it was too late. The narrative had shifted from powerful men destroy innocent woman to cheating wife cries sufferer when caught. That afternoon, I got a call from Sarah Chen. Vanessa's lawyer wants to meet, she said. I think they're ready to negotiate. What kind of negotiation? The kind where she drops the lawsuit and the divorce gets finalized quickly and quietly. We met at Sarah's office the next day. Vanessa looked terrible, pale, exhausted, defeated. Her uncle sat beside her, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else. My client is prepared to be reasonable, he said. She's willing to withdraw the employment lawsuit in exchange for a modest settlement and a non-disclosure agreement. Sarah laughed. Your client is in no position to make demands. She's been caught committing infidelity, she tried to extort her employer, and she's now facing potential disbarment proceedings. What disbarment proceedings? Vanessa asked. The ones the State Bar Association is considering based on your conduct with Blake Parsons, Sarah said. Sleeping with a senior partner while pursuing other partners isn't exactly ethical behavior for an attorney. Vanessa's face crumpled. This is insane. I made one mistake. You made a series of mistakes, I said quietly. And now you have to live with the consequences. Will, please, we were married for 8 years. That has to count for something. I looked at her, really looked at her, and tried to remember the woman I'd fallen in love with. She was still beautiful, still smart, still capable of making me feel sorry for her, but she wasn't the woman I'd married. That woman had died slowly over the past 3 years, replaced by someone who valued success over love, image over substance, ambition over loyalty. It does count for something, I said. It counts as 8 years I'll never get back. The final divorce decree was signed 2 weeks later. Vanessa got her car, her clothes, and her personal belongings. I got everything else. The house, the savings, the retirement accounts, and most importantly, my freedom. Blake Parsons was disbarred 6 months later for multiple ethical violations. He now sells insurance in a strip mall outside the city. Vanessa found work at a small firm in another state, handling personal injury cases for a fraction of her former salary. She never remarried. Richard sold Henderson, Blake & Associates to a firm in Chicago and used the proceeds to expand Harlan Industries' real estate division. We've built 12 major projects in the past year, employing hundreds of construction workers, engineers, and architects. I still go to Murphy's on Wednesday nights, still sit in my corner booth, still drink bourbon, and catch up with my old friends. The difference is that now I'm proud of who I am and what I've accomplished. I'm not ashamed of my background, my injury, or my choices. And I'm definitely not ashamed of the woman I used to be married to, because she's not my problem anymore.